The night was already electric. Wembley Stadium thundered with stomping feet and clapping hands. 80,000 voices pounding the rhythm of Radio GAGA in perfect sync. Spotlights swept like search beams over the crowd, catching glittering faces, sweat-shining foreheads, and raised arms punching the air. The bass vibrated through the steel skeleton of the stadium, rattling rib cages, shaking the earth itself. At the center of it all prowled Freddie Mercury. He was a living flame, white tank top soaked in sweat, dark hair curling against his temples. The half-mic stand spun in his grip, like a sword, catching the lights and flinging sparks of reflection into the crowd. Every flick of his wrist, every arch of his back sent the audience deeper into frenzy. The chorus was cresting, the band hitting their stride, the audience clapping in perfect thunder, when Freddie strutted toward the edge of the stage, leaning over the barricade. With mischievous grin, he thrust the mic toward the front rows. The crowd erupted, hands clawing upward, desperate to touch even the shadow of his presence. And then it happened. A young man, face red with adrenaline, arms stretched higher than the rest, latched onto the microphone. For an instant, it was tug of war. Freddie pulling back, the fan gripping with wild determination. Security lunged forward. But before they could intervene, the fan ripped the mic from Freddie's grasp. A gasp tore through Wembley. The band faltered, Brian's guitar sliding off key, Roger's drumbeat stumbling. The sudden rupture of rhythm sent a shiver through the stadium. 80,000 people, who had been singing and clapping in perfect harmony, froze in collective disbelief. The fan lifted the microphone to his mouth. His voice cracked, raw and shaky, but through the speakers it boomed across Wembley. All we hear is Radio GAJ. It was off-key, too loud, unpolished, and unforgettable. Gasps turned into laughter, then half-hearted cheers. But just as quickly, security pounced, ready to rip the mic from the fan's grip and end the disruption. Wait! Freddie's voice, sharp, commanding, unamplified, cut through the chaos. He threw out his arm, halting the guards mid-motion. The stadium fell silent, the kind of silence that weighs heavier than any sound. Freddie bent down, retrieving the mic stand that clattered to the stage floor. He straightened slowly, eyes blazing, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. The fan, wide-eyed, clutched the mic like contraband, trembling but refusing to let go. The standoff was magnetic. 80,000 people held their breath, watching a duel unfold under the glare of white-hot lights. Freddie's grin widened. He gestured grandly, as if presenting his unexpected challenger to the world. Well, he purred, his voice carrying even without the mic. Looks like we got ourselves a volunteer. The crowd exploded in laughter and cheers. The fan's hand shook as he held the microphone to his lips again. All we hear is Radio JJ, he bellowed, his voice cracking spectacularly. The sound echoed across Wembley, imperfect but defiant. The audience roared. Some laughed, some booed, but most cheered, swept up in the audacity, the sheer insanity of what was happening. Freddie circled the edge of the stage, eyes never leaving the fan. He raised a finger, pointing like a conductor. Go on then, darling, he said, drawing out the words like velvet steel. Don't just shout, sing it. The band, frozen in disbelief, glanced at one another. Brian May gave a small shrug, then strummed a tentative chord. Roger hit the snare in time. The music hadn't died, it was waiting. The fan stammered, half singing, half yelling the next line. The notes were clumsy, awkward, but the crowd howled in delight. Freddie leaned over the stage, his eyes glittering with dangerous joy. Not bad, he teased, lips curling. But you're on my stage now. And on my stage, darling, you deliver. With a sudden lunge, he snatched the mic back. The fans' gasp echoed through the speakers, followed by another thunderous roar from the crowd. Freddie stood tall, holding the mic high like a trophy. Then, in a moment that no one saw coming, he thrust it back toward the fan. Your turn again. The stadium shook with disbelief. 80,000 people screamed, laughed, shouted. The fan, trembling, seized the mic once more and shouted another broken line into the void. The sound was terrible, but the moment was transcendent. Freddie clapped his hands theatrically, nodding in mock approval. "He's got spirit," he shouted, voice booming now through the speakers. "What do you think? Wembley, keep him or throw him out." The stadium responded with a deafening mix of cheers and boos. The energy was wild, dangerous, intoxicating. Freddie raised his hands, silencing them. He stepped closer to the edge of the stage, crouching low, his eyes locked on the fan. His voice dropped, intimate, conspiratorial. "All right, darling, you've had your chance, but this is how it's done." He wrenched the mic back, stood tall, and let out a note so pure, so soaring. It split the night like lightning. The band crashed back in on cue, and the audience erupted in an explosion of relief and ecstasy. Freddie strutted across the stage, voice cutting like fire, but his eyes kept flicking back toward the fan, who was now shaking his head in disbelief, both mortified and exalted. The moment should have been a disaster. It should have ruined the flow, broken the illusion. But Freddie Mercury was no ordinary performer. He was a magician, a king, a lightning rod for chaos. And in his hands, what began as a theft became the spark of something greater. The crowd didn't know it yet, but the night had changed. If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The music still hung in fragments, like shards of broken glass scattered across Wembley. Brian's guitar had gone quiet. Roger's sticks hovered over his kit, waiting. John's fingers rested on the strings, ready but unsure. 80,000 fans buzzed with nervous laughter and disbelief, their eyes flicking between the wide-eyed young man clutching the mic and the legend who stood only a few feet away, calm as a lion about to pounce. Freddie Mercury's grin was sly, feline, but his eyes burned with something sharper. He twirled the detached mic stand in his hands like a fencer playing with his foil, circling the stage edge with fans still leaned forward, microphone trembling in his grip. "Well then, darling," Freddie purred, every syllable dripping with theater, "you've stolen the crown jewels. Question is, can you wear them?" The crowd erupted in cheers and whistles. Some shouted, saying. Others booed, urging security to drag the intruder out. The polarity electrified the atmosphere. Nobody knew which way the night would tilt. The fan, red-faced, sweaty, eyes darting between the sea of people and the man before him, looked as if he might collapse. He opened his mouth but only managed to stammer. I didn't mean... Freddie cut him off with a sharp wave of the hand. "Oh, no," he said, theatrically wagging a finger. "You meant it, darling. You grabbed my microphone in front of 80,000 people. That's not an accident. That's a declaration." The audience roared, feeding on Freddie's words like dry tinder meeting flame. Freddie leaned closer, crouching at the edge of the stage, balancing effortlessly on the balls of his feet. His voice dropped lower, intimate but carried across the stadium. "Now, here's the thing. You can run from it, or you can own it." The fan swallowed hard, clutching the mic with both hands. Freddie leaned back, spreading his arms wide. "So, Wembley, what do we think? Should we give him a chance?" The crowd exploded. A deafening chorus of cheers and jeers collided in the night air. "Yes," roared thousands. "NOO," screamed others. The noise shook the steel skeleton of the stadium. Freddie smirked, glancing over his shoulder at the band. "Hear that, boys? They're thirsty for blood or brilliance. Let's find out which." He turned back to the fan. "All right, darling, you've got my stage, my microphone, my people. Sing for them. Show us your heart." The young man's chest heaved, sweat plastering his shirt to his body. His hands trembled as he lifted the mic to his mouth. The crowd hushed, leaning forward, anticipation thick as fog. He sang. The sound was ragged, too loud, shaky. His voice cracked halfway through the line, and he stumbled over the lyrics. A ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, sharp as a knife. His eyes widened, panic setting in. Freddie pounced. Not to mock, to save. He dropped into a crouch, his own mouth inches from the mic, and sang the next line in harmony, his velvet voice slicing to the fans' clumsy notes. The sudden contrast, the raw amateur against Freddie Mercury's impossible brilliance, should have humiliated the man. Instead, Freddie's presence softened the edges, guiding him like a hand steadying a child learning to walk. The audience gasped, then cheered wildly. There you go, Freddie shouted, pulling back just enough to give the fan space. Again! The band, sensing the shift, fell in with a steady, subdued rhythm, giving the moment shape. Brian's guitar whispered chords. Roger tapped the snare like a heartbeat. The fan tried again, voice cracking, but steadier this time. Freddie leaned close once more, harmonizing, pulling him back into rhythm. Their voices, one jagged, one soaring, collided in the air, raw but alive. The crowd erupted, stomping and clapping, swept up in the audacity of it all. Freddie threw his head back, laughing. "He's bloody doing it," he cried into the mic. Then he turned to the audience, eyes blazing. "Wembley, help him out. Don't just sit there judging. Lift him up." The stadium obeyed instantly. 80,000 voices shouted the refrain back, a tidal wave of sound crashing over the fan, drowning his fear in pure human noise. The light swept across the sea of raised arms, illuminating faces slick with sweat and joy. The fan's posture changed. He straightened, gripping the mic tighter, his voice no longer timid but bold, reckless. Carried by the wave beneath him, his off-key shout became part of something larger, swallowed and transformed by the sheer volume of Wembley's choir. Freddie beamed, pacing across the stage like a conductor commanding an orchestra. "Yes, that's it, darlings. Louder. Sing it like your life depends on it." The arena shook. For a moment, time folded. This wasn't Queen performing for an audience. It was Queen with the audience, every barrier between stage and seats obliterated. The fan at the barricade wasn't a trespasser anymore. He was a symbol of boldness, of foolishness, of the fragile courage it takes to stand in front of thousands and risk humiliation. And Freddie Mercury, instead of crushing him, had turned that risk into fire. The young man lowered the mic, breathless, tears streaking his cheeks. He looked up at Freddie, awe and disbelief written across his face. Freddie crouched again, locking eyes with him. His voice softened, dropping the flamboyant armor for just a moment. "See, darling, it's not about being perfect. It's about being brave." The words carried through the speakers, landing heavy in the hearts of the crowd. The fan covered his face with his hands, overwhelmed. The audience roared, not with laughter now, but with applause, stamping and clapping until the stadium trembled. Freddie straightened, turned to the audience, and raised the microphone high. "And that," he shouted, "is rock and roll." The cheer that followed was thunderous, spilling over the walls of Wembley into the London night. Brian struck a chord. Roger hit the snare. The band stood ready to erupt back into full force. But the energy had changed. Something had cracked open. A night that had begun as another monumental Queen concert was now teetering on the edge of something different, something legendary. And Freddie, eyes alight, knew it. He stalked back to center stage, twirling the mic stand, grin sharp as a blade. The fan, still shaking, was gently pulled back by security. Not dragged, not punished, but escorted with surprising care, the crowd patting his shoulders as he passed. Freddie pointed after him, laughing into the mic. "Our guest star, ladies and gentlemen. Didn't see that coming, did you?" The crowd roared again, stamping and clapping in a chaotic rhythm. But Freddie wasn't done. He wasn't going to let the moment fade into novelty. He leaned into the mic, eyes narrowing, voice dropping to a dangerous purr. "Oh no, darlings. This night has only just begun." The lights cut, plunging Wembley into darkness. The crowd screamed in anticipation. The next act was about to begin. The stadium still vibrated with the aftershocks of chaos. 80,000 voices had just roared themselves raw, cheering for a moment that, by all logic, should never have happened. Security had guided the trembling fan back into a sea of bodies, but the energy left behind was still alive. Frantic, electric, unstable. Wembley buzzed like a live wire. At the center of it all stood Freddie Mercury, grinning like a man who had just been handed a storm and decided to conduct it. His white tank top clung to him, sweat glistening in the harsh beams of the spotlights. He twirled his microphone stand once, slammed it down like a staff, and raised the mic to his lips. "All right, Wembley," he shouted, voice cracking like thunder. "If one brave lunatic can grab the mic and sing his bloody heart out, He pointed toward the section where Fan had stood, drawing another eruption of cheers. Then what's stopping the rest of you? The crowd exploded, a tidal wave of sound that shook the rafters. Freddie strutted to stage left, raising the mic toward one side of the audience. "GA!" he bellowed. Tens of thousands of voices screamed it back. "GA!" He darted to stage right. "J!" Another thunderous reply. "GA!" Back to center. "JJ!" The response hit like a seismic wave. "GA! GA!" Freddie threw his head back and laughed, wild and joyous. He spun in a circle, pointing the mic at different sections of the stadium, turning Wembley into a giant, chaotic choir. Each side competed with the others, trying to outscream, outsing, outlove him. The band fell behind him, Roger slamming the drums like cannon fire, Brian's guitar growling a steady rhythm, John's bass thumping like a heartbeat. "Louder," Freddie commanded, his voice sharp as a whip. "I want to hear you in bloody outer space." The crowd obeyed. The sound swelled, bigger than any amplifier, bigger than the walls of the stadium. The ground itself seemed to tremble with the force of it. Freddie dropped to his knees at the edge of the stage, clutching the mic in both hands like a priest raising a relic. His eyes blazed, his teeth flashed, and his voice rose above the storm. "Yes, that's it. That's bloody beautiful." He leapt back to his feet, dancing across the stage, feeding off the chaos. Every movement, every flick of his wrist, pulled the audience tighter into his orbit. Then, with a sudden, dramatic pause, he cut the band off. The instruments stopped on a dime, leaving only the echo of 80,000 voices still chanting "J, J" into the night. Freddie stood perfectly still, mic raised, his chest heaving. The silence that followed was deafening. Then he grinned, that wicked, theatrical grin that said he was about to change the rules again. "You see, my darlings," he purred, pacing slowly, his voice intimate now. "Carry across the hushed stadium. That silly fool down there reminded us of something. Music isn't about being perfect. It's about being alive. It's about having the guts to make noise, even when your voice cracks, even when you're afraid." He let the words hang there, heavy and electric. The crowd murmured, their energy shifting from wild to reverent. "And tonight," he continued, raising a finger skyward, "you're not just watching Queen. You are Queen." The audience erupted again, stamping, clapping, screaming until the air shook. Freddie thrust the mic into the air like a sword, and the band crashed back in. The lights blazed alife, sweeping across the crowd in blinding beams. He launched into the chorus of Radio GAGA. But this time he didn't sing alone. 80,000 people sang with him, their voices ragged and imperfect but united, roaring the words back with such force it drowned even Freddie's booming voice. He didn't care. He laughed, spinning, dancing, letting the ocean of sound crash over him. He pointed back to the section where the fan had grabbed the mic. "That's where it started," he shouted. "Don't you forget it." The cameras caught the fans facing the crowd. Stunned, tear-streaked, half hidden behind the friends pounding his shoulders in disbelief. When his image hit the giant screens, Wembley went berserk, chanting his name though they didn't even know it. Freddie saw it, and his grin widened. He turned back to the audience, his voice sharp and ecstatic. "See what happens when one mad soul takes a risk? We all become part of it." The song surged toward its peak. Freddie guided the audience like a conductor, pointing to the left side, then the right, splitting them into call and response. The sound turned tribal, primal, like a ritual under the stars. The stadium became less a concert venue and more a cathedral of noise. By the final chorus, Freddie had thrown away the script entirely. He stopped singing, holding the mic above his head, letting Wembley carry the entire song. 80,000 voices became one, filling the night sky with an anthem that belonged to everyone. When the last line crashed into silence, Freddie dropped his knees, bowing his head. The crowd screamed so loudly it rattled the steel girders. He looked up, his chest heaving, eyes shining with a strange intensity. "That," he shouted into the mic, "is why I will never leave you, Wembley. You don't just listen. You become the music." The ovation was deafening. People clapped until their hands ached, screamed until their throats tore. Strangers hugged each other, sobbing with laughter and joy. Backstage, crew members shook their heads in disbelief. What could have been disaster? A fan stealing the mic, derailing the show, had been transformed into a once-in-a-lifetime moment. A moment no one present would ever forget. Freddie stalked back to center stage, chest heaving, eyes alight with the fire of a man who had just bent chaos into art. He raised the mic again, lips curling into a smile equal parts mischief and majesty. "And now," he said, voice low but carrying, "let's see how much further we can push this night." The lights cut again, plunging Wembley into blackness. The crowd screamed, desperate, hungry, ready for whatever came next. Freddie Mercury had them all, the band, the crew, the 80,000 souls in the stadium, in the palm of his hand. And he wasn't done yet. The stadium was quaking, still pulsing with the roar of 80,000 voices chanting, clapping, stomping. Freddie Mercury stood in the center of the stage like a king at the height of his power, the microphone raised in triumph, the lights framing him in a halo of smoke and sweat. His grin stretched wide, but behind it burned an intensity that made even the most chaotic crowd fall silent when he wanted them to. "Wembley," he shouted, spinning in a circle, arms thrown wide. "You've outdone yourselves. You sound bloody marvelous." The crowd roared in answer, stamping their feet so hard that the very concrete seemed to tremble beneath them. Freddie laughed, shaking his head, and then pointed toward the section of the stands where the fan had first stolen the microphone. The big screen zoomed in automatically, capturing the young man's stunned, tear-streaked face as he realized the entire world was watching him again. "There he is," Freddie bellowed, his voice booming across the stadium. "Our guest star." The roar that followed was deafening. Fans near the young man slapped his shoulders, hugged him, screamed his name even though they didn't know it. He covered his face with his hands, overwhelmed, but Freddie wasn't about to let him hide. "Oh, no, darling," Freddie said, grinning wickedly. "You're not finished yet." The crowd screamed in disbelief. Security guards looked at one another, unsure, until Freddie waved them on. "Bring him back here." The words detonated like fireworks. The audience erupted into chants. "Bring him up! Bring him up!" Security waded into the crowd, gently guiding the fan forward. He stumbled, shaking, his friends screaming encouragement behind him. When he reached the barricade, the guards lifted him up and over. His shoes hit the stage floor, and suddenly he was standing there, bathed in light, the roar of Wembley crashing down on him like a tidal wave. Freddie strutted over, swinging his half-mic stand like a sword, his grin wide and theatrical. He put an arm around the fan's trembling shoulders and pulled him to the center of the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Freddie announced, his voice booming, "the bravest lunatic in London." The crowd roared with approval, chanting louder and louder. The fan's chest heaved, his hands shaking violently. He tried to hand the mic back to Freddie, but Freddie shook his head. "Oh, no, darling," he purred. "You grabbed it once, you're going to hold it again." The fan froze, staring down at the microphone in disbelief. Freddie leaned close, his mustache brushing the corner of a smile. "It's not about being perfect," he whispered into the young man's ear, just loud enough for the mic to catch. "It's about being bloody fearless." Then he turned to the band, snapped his fingers, and shouted, "Brian, give us something sweet." Brian May struck a chord, his guitar wailing into life. Roger tapped the snare in a soft, steady beat. John's bass throbbed low, grounding the moment. Freddie raised the fan's hand, the one clutching the mic, high above their heads like a referee announcing a champion. "Tonight, Wembley," he shouted. "This man is going to sing with me." The response was seismic. People screamed, cried, laughed in disbelief. This wasn't just a concert anymore. It was chaos, theater, communion. Freddie crouched low beside the fan, one arm around his shoulders, and sang the opening line of "We Will Rock You." His voice boomed across Wembley, commanding and rich. Then he shoved the mic toward the fan. The fan shouted the next line, ragged, broken, off-key. The crowd went berserk. Freddie clapped his hands together, stamped his feet, and gestured for the audience to join in. The thunderous stomp-stomp clap rolled across the stadium, rattling every beam of steel. The fan shouted another line, carried by 80,000 voices echoing with him. Freddie's grin widened. He wrapped an arm tight around the young man's shoulders, their heads almost touching as he bellowed the chorus with him. We will rock you. The crowd detonated. Every single person screaming the words back, their voices blending into one colossal wave of sound. The fan's tears streamed freely down his cheeks, his face red with strain. But he shouted with everything he had left, his voice cracking on every word. And Freddie, instead of outshining him, sang with him, supporting him, harmonizing, letting the imperfection become the point. On the big screens, the image of them side by side, Freddie Mercury, the greatest showman alive, and an ordinary fan plucked from the masses, burned itself into memory. The song surged toward its climax. Roger smashed the drums like thunderclaps. Brian's guitar screamed, and the stomp-stomp clap became the heartbeat of the stadium. At the final chorus, Freddie pulled back, holding the mic out toward the audience. You sing it for him, he roared. 80,000 voices answered. We will rock you. The sheer force was overwhelming, like a hurricane of sound. The fans' legs buckled, overcome with emotion, but Freddie caught him, holding him upright with one arm. When the last note crashed into silence, Freddie kissed the fan's forehead, snatched the mic back, and thrust his other arm high. He's a bloody champion, he screamed. The stadium detonated again, the chant shifting instantly. Champion, champion, champion. The fan collapsed to his knees, sobbing, overwhelmed by the tidal wave of sound. Security moved forward to help, but Freddie raised a hand. He crouched down, lifted the fan to his feet, and whispered something into his ear, something the microphones didn't catch. Whatever it was, it made the young man laugh through his tears, nodding furiously. Only then did Freddie gently hand him to security, who guided him carefully back to the barricade. The crowd reached out to pat his shoulders as he passed, treating him not as an intruder anymore, but as part of history. Freddie straightened, raised his arms high, and shouted, "That, my darlings, is rock and roll." The ovation was deafening, rolling across the stadium like thunder. The lights blazed, the band struck the opening chords of We Are the Champions, and the night soared into legend. The chant still shook the stadium floor. Champion, champion, champion. Tens of thousands of voices slammed together in rhythm, echoing like thunder inside Wembley's steel skeleton. The word had started as a playful label Freddie tossed into the air, but now it was an anthem, a coronation. Freddie Mercury stood center stage, his chest rising and falling, his white tank top clinging to his skin, sweat dripping down his jawline. He held the mic stand high above his head like a sword, his grin wide, his eyes blazing with the fire of a man who had bent chaos into magic. "Wembley," he roared. "You've just witnessed history." The crowd erupted. Freddie pointed toward the barricade, where the young fan had been returned by security. He was back in the crowd now, sobbing into the shoulders of strangers who hugged him like a brother. The cameras swung to capture his face, magnifying on the giant screens. His eyes were red, his cheeks wet, but he was smiling, a bewildered, radiant smile that made 80,000 people roar with approval. Freddie turned back to microphone, his voice dropping low, but carrying clear as a bell. "That, my darlings, is the proof. Rock and roll is not just up here." He tapped his chest, then swept his hand across the massive sea of people. "It's out there. It's in every one of you." The audience screamed, stamping and clapping until the ground trembled. Freddie's grin softened into something more vulnerable. "And tonight," he said, pointing toward the fan again, "one brave soul reminded us all why we're here. Not to be perfect, not be clever, but to be together." The roar was deafening, but Freddie raised his hand, silencing it like a conductor stilling an orchestra. He stepped back to the piano, sat down slowly, and struck the opening chords of We Are the Champions. The crowd erupted with a scream that shook the sky. Fireworks fired off early, bursting gold against the night. Freddie leaned into the mic, his voice softer now, carrying the weight of everything that had just happened. "I've paid my dues time after time." The words hit differently that night. They weren't just lyrics. They were confession, testimony, acknowledgement. Every person in the stadium sang with him, their voices trembling, cracking, raw with emotion. The big screens flicked back to the fan. He was standing now, his arms raised high, tears streaming down his face. Around him, strangers sang with him, their arms around his shoulders, turning his moment into everyone's moment. Freddie's eyes caught him on the screen. His voice broke ever so slightly as he sang the next line. I've had my share of sand kicked in my face, but I've come through. By the time he reached the chorus, the entire stadium was singing with him, 80,000 voices fusing into one unstoppable wall of sound. We are the champions, my friends. Freddie stood from the piano, clutching the mic stand, his body trembling with the sheer force of the moment. He didn't try to outsing the crowd. He let them carry him, leaning into the storm, conducting them with sweeps of his arm. He crossed the stage, strutting like a gladiator, his grin feral, his eyes shining with tears. At the barricade, the fan looked up at him, mouth open in disbelief. Freddie pointed directly at him. You're the champion tonight, he shouted between verses. Don't you ever forget it. The crowd roared, stamping and clapping harder. The chant of champion, champion, bled seamlessly into the song itself. By the second chorus, Freddie stopped singing entirely. He crouched at the edge of the stage, thrust the mic stand toward the crowd, and let them take over. 80,000 voices roared the anthem into the London sky. It wasn't polished. It wasn't on key. But it was perfect. We are the champions. We are the champions. The sound was deafening, like the roar of an ocean crashing over cliffs. Freddie's grin split wide. He pounded his chest with one hand, tears glistening in the harsh white lights. He spun in a slow circle, drinking in the sound, the sight, the electricity of 80,000 people becoming one body, one voice, one legend. When the final chorus came, Freddie stepped back, raised the mic high, and bellowed the last line with everything left in him. Of the world. Fireworks erupted overhead, showering sparks of gold and silver across the night. Brian's guitar wailed. Roger slammed the drums like thunder. John's bass throbbed like the heartbeat of the earth itself. The final chord rang out, echoing into silence. Freddie froze in the spotlight, chest heaving, sweat dripping. Then he bowed low. One hand pressed his heart. The ovation was deafening. People screamed until their throats tore, clapped until their palms stung, stamped until their legs ached. The chants of champion, champion, refused to die, rolling across Wembley like thunder. Freddie raised his head slowly, eyes shining with tears. His voice was soft now, but carried clear through the roar. Remember this night, he said. Not because of me, not because of Queen. Remember it because one of you had the courage to grab the mic, and because all of you, he swept his hand across the sea of people, turned into music. The roar doubled, shaking the very bones of Wembley. Freddie kissed the mic, set it gently on the piano, and walked to the very edge of the stage. He stood there, arms wide, basking in the thunder of the crowd, soaking in their love like a man who knew he was part of something eternal. The lights dimmed. The band stepped back. Freddie Mercury raised one final fist into the air, then vanished into shadows. But the chants didn't stop. They carried on long after the band had left, long after the fireworks smoke had drifted away. Champion, champion. And in the weeks, months, and years that followed, the story spread. The night a random fan grabbed the mic, and instead of disaster, Freddie Mercury turned it into legend. The night Wembley itself sang, not as an audience, but as a single voice. The night an ordinary man, for a few wild minutes, became Queen. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.